So who are you?
I'm Kyle McSlarrow.
Yeah?
I'm President and CEO of the National Cable and Telecommunications Association. And also I should say it's, this association is comprised of the cable operators, so Comcast, Time Warner Cable, Cox, people like that, but also 200 networks.
Yeah.
So it's both sides of the house, which makes it kind of interesting when you have buyers and sellers in the same organization. When you talk about communications policy, which is sort of the bread and butter of what I do, what NCTA does, it does strike me that there's a whole world way outside DC that's usually more expert and has strong opinions about the kinds of stuff that we're working on. And I think a conversation is developing now, but it's about 10 years late. Yeah. And I think both when I travel around and I talk to people in the tech world, I find just almost a complete absence of any understanding of how DC works, and I think the reverse is true. And so to my mind, and I have a very naked agenda, I tend to believe that notwithstanding, as you started out, notwithstanding sort of the quick, oh, everybody hates the cable industry, yeah. I tend to believe that the more you can get the facts out and actually force people to back up what they say, the better our story is. And that's my job. My job is to be an advocate for an industry and to make sure no great harm gets done to us on Capitol Hill or at the FCC.
So what keeps you up at night and worrying, when you say great harm, what keeps you up at night that might happen to your industry? Or
to me, there's really sort of two threats, and I'm not sure how real they are, but it's my job to worry. I think threat number one is the idea that if a bunch of entrepreneurs can go out and invest their own capital building broadband pipes, which give us all the platform that we're now using, and then all the other geniuses build the applications on that platform, the idea that you can have the government regulate that or start to take pieces of it or force you to do things with it that you wouldn't otherwise do is worrisome. Well, net neutrality, which we can come back to in a second if you want to, since that's probably a larger subject, but it's a lot of little things. For example, you say cable, most people think video, right? Yeah. Well, we haven't been video for a decade, right? We're a broadband pipe. We have a video service, we have obviously high-speed internet, and now we have phone, and soon we're going to have a wireless component added on to that. The vast majority of that pipe, something like 500 megahertz, is devoted to video today. The vast majority of that is analog video. Well, we're all moving to digital. Yeah. So what happens with that capacity? All that capacity, and our goal is to take it, move it out of video, put it into broadband. So instead of an average of 5 megabits downstream, we're talking about 160 megabits downstream, which is what everybody says they want. Yeah. But you've got to make that, you got to connect those two dots for policymakers, because they have lots of other things they'd like to do. They'd like to tell you, well, you know what, we think it'd be a great idea that, in a given community, that every public access idea or every city council meeting ought to have their own channel, and you should carry it. Okay, well, you could do that, but it's a zero-sum game, right? I mean, it's a pipe with a certain amount of capacity, and our customers, I believe, want faster broadband, yeah. Right? They don't actually want more public, educational, and governmental channels, right? And people say, what's a public, educational, governmental channel? And I say, well, are you a cable customer? Yes. Okay. You know those channels because those are the channels right after the networks, like channel 10, that you skip through right? That desert from like 10 to 40 you skip through, those are all government mandated channels that we're forced to carry. So that's one set of issues. And the other set of issues, which in some ways is more worrisome because it's, I think it kind of goes against the traditions that we've had in this country. I think there's just a growing sense of comfort with regulating media in general. And to my mind, it raises significant First Amendment issues. And it's interesting because I think we're perilously close to up being down, where those people who are advocating more government regulation, think media consolidation or whatever it is, are starting to cloak themselves as free speech advocates when the opposite is more nearly true. I mean, a lot of issues within that, but I think those two trends.
It's interesting because everything you have talked about so far is reflective of a world where there was limited supply, right? I mean, I grew up in a world where there was 3 channels, right?
Me too.
And today we have how many hundreds, on my cable box?
Yeah, I actually tried to describe to my 8-year-old, we had 3 channels. We got up to go change the channels, and oh, by the way, at some point, it broke, and you actually had to use pliers, right, to change the channel. He looked at me like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Yeah, my friend, my son's sitting over here. My friend Buzz Bregman told my son that he had 2 channels when he grew up, and my son looked at him and goes, "How did you survive?" Because I watch how he consumes media. He has his Mac in front of him. He's watching a movie or watching TV a little bit, on our big screen, and sometimes he pulls out his iPhone at the same time. He's consuming media in a far different way. Doesn't the web take, and an open internet take care of a lot of these problems? But I guess that's where the friction comes from, right? The policymakers still are living in that 3-channel world where they think that they have to get a few channels for the public to communicate over. Well, where on the web we don't need that anymore.
Right. Well, it's actually, I think it's 2 things. I think you're right. I think it's one, there's a false sense of scarcity when in fact you've got platforms now that allow you an infinite number of choices, whether you're talking about video or something else. And then the other reality is there actually is scarcity in the sense that the platform itself, in this case, let's just take the broadband pipe, it does require somebody to go raise capital, invest, build it out, and you have a certain amount of capacity. Now that capacity will grow over time, and obviously demand will just drive that. But it's not like the money just grows on trees. Yeah. In just our industry's case, we invested $130 billion over the last 10 years putting fiber in the ground to build the hybrid fiber coax lines that we have. And what was the reward for these companies on Wall Street? They got hammered, right? Because everybody said, where's the return on investment? Now, over time, I think it'll work fine. It's not like they're not making money, but it does, and none of this was subsidized. I mean, we don't take a dime of government subsidy. It's just all private capital. And, it does make, a CEO, I think twice before investing to build more capacity in a system. So it's scarce in a sense and yet not in the sense that most people think about it. And I think you're right. People are living, they just haven't caught up to the reality of where we are. And it was only a couple of years ago. And this to me is the most amazing thing considering, going back to when I was at grassroots.com, which was 99, 2000. We actually had a different opinion of the cable industry. We were cheering them on, right? Because we knew for a destination site, we needed broadband. And the only industry that was building broadband to any appreciable degree, because the phone companies really hadn't started rolling out DSL, was cable. And, it was only a couple of years ago that we had more broadband customers in America than dial-up. Yeah. And yet, here we are, now it's, I don't know what the percentage is now it's 60, 70%. And it was only 5 years ago that the world changed in that sense in terms of broadband, and it's about to change again when we roll out wideband, which is the 100+ megabits that I was talking about.
Is HDTV driving a lot of these things? Because when you get a 60-inch TV and you don't have very many HD channels, I bet you start calling your cable company going, hey man.
Yeah, I don't know what the average is right now.
I know I did when I got my HD TV. I was like, hey, come on, there's only 4 channels that are HD, and I live in Silicon Valley. Come on, man.
Well,
how do I get more?
But that shouldn't be the case today, right?
No, it's totally different.
My guess is you have an average of 30, 40 HD channels now, and they're throwing them on. No, I think we all went through that. I was the same way. As soon as I think a couple of years ago we probably had 15 HD channels, and I was just I was watching, I was basically watching sunsets in HD just because it was in HD.
Yeah.
I just couldn't go back to analog, right? But now most of the principal networks are in HD, and more, and now I'm watching the European Cup in HD. I'm a happy guy. So I think once you get the flat screen, once you get the HD service, there's no going back. So I think over time, next couple of years, you're going to see, for us, a real migration of the analog customers into digital, and I think digital means ultimately HD, and I think the HD content's driving, as you said, a lot of it.
Yeah, I'd certainly on my computer, I'm hooking up a computer to my TV. To my TV, as well as my cable box. Do you see a marriage of those? Tell me what you see happening in the home, and what you're trying to push into the home.
Yeah, I think our vision, if we can put it really simply, our vision is, someone can walk into Circuit City, buy a flat screen, bring it home, put it on the wall, not have to use a set-top box because that functionality is built in, and only use one remote. And that device would be networked with, certainly your PC, but it could be handheld. And whatever we're driving in the home, we want on all of those things, right? And ultimately, although we've not really solved this part of the problem yet, we want you to be able to leave with that content and control it from outside. That's the wireless play that we're still, as an industry, trying to figure out. But inside the home, it's all networked. And downstairs, I don't know if you saw the broadband home we have downstairs, we show, shifting content from a PC to TV and vice versa. That's what we want. Consumers want to basically be able to access their content, do it whenever they want to do it, and take it and consume it on whatever device they choose. Yeah. That's our vision too.
Why do many consumers see other countries as ahead of American broadband? Like South Korea or whatnot. Somebody just down in the lobby even said, ask them about South Korea. Why aren't we all like South Korea?
Oh, did they? Well, I'll have to fire them.
No. It wasn't your employees. It was another government employee that met me downstairs.
It's interesting. I think a simple answer to the question would be because they are ahead, and it's actually more complicated. I went to Asia last year and I asked this question. Okay, so tell me about your networks. Went to Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and in every case they described a network that was built just like ours. So we said, okay, we get that. It's the same as ours. So how is it you guys are delivering 100 megabits? And they're like, well, actually that's just marketing. Like, well, in America that's actually illegal, right? We can't say that. But also, I think part of the truth is you've got so many people in apartment buildings. When we say fiber to the node, we mean a node in a neighborhood. It serves, a couple hundred houses. When they say fiber to the node, they mean, it's going right to the base of an apartment building with 50,000 people in it. And they are getting faster speeds. So I think some of it is the density of the population. Some of it is the fact that, and not just the fact that they're in apartment buildings dense, but the fact that their populations using broadband are actually clustered in major cities. Yeah. We have, we are geographically diverse, so there are pockets of the country, if you take New Jersey, for example, that more nearly resemble South Korea, and there you see penetration and speeds much closer to those countries. But I also think government policy has had something to do with it. I think government policy unduly slowed us down in the rollout of broadband, particularly for the telephone companies. I think in our case, with the '96 Telecom Act, when they sort of deregulated our industry, that allowed us finally to start investing to roll out broadband. But that deregulation took place over 3 years. It wasn't until '99 that we were fully deregulated, and at that point, the spending spree took off. Yeah. One could argue that we could have started this 3 or 4 years earlier. And now that it has taken off, it's a real thing. And as I say, we're actually building more capacity. The speeds are getting greater. I mean, people are getting faster speeds, and at least your broadband bills, your high-speed internet bill's not going up. I mean, you're just getting faster speeds. They just sort of say, hey, by the way, it's 15 megabits this month. Yeah. And that's because of competition.
That leads into network neutrality. Tell me what your view of network neutrality is, and how you guys are going to make some money based on that investment, right?
Well,
certainly I can see some pressure of trying to charge for different tiers of usage or whatnot.
I think people are trying to figure it out. And first of all, net neutrality is kind of a frustrating issue because it means different things. Mm-hmm. And a couple of years ago, and I've testified more times than I care to imagine on the subject over the last 3 years, but when I first started testifying, the big issue was, are network providers going to block users from accessing any website or application of their choice? And I went up there and said, why would we do that? We want our customers to be happy. We're not doing it. We're not going to do it. And over time, people eventually figured out, oh yeah, that's right. It would be really stupid of them to do that. So then it kind of morphed into, well, you're going to discriminate against other people's content in favor of your own. And again, we dutifully went up there and said, why would we do that? We sell a broadband product. It's, the sales pitch, if you will, is your ability to access and do anything you want on the web. Yeah. And then people sort of, okay, we get that too. And then it sort of morphed into what I think is more troublesome, which is the argument that how we manage the network should be properly subject to government regulation. And the classic case here is peer-to-peer, right? I have nothing against peer-to-peer. Many of my, if not most of my companies, actually partner with various peer-to-peer companies, BitTorrent, whoever, because it's a distribution technology, and it's fairly efficient in some ways, and yet it has challenges in others. And I think when the issue becomes second-guessing a network manager's operation of how they're satisfying their customers, I think that's worrisome, and that's sort of been the issue for the last 6 months. And I actually think the good news is you now have engineers talking to engineers. I mean, what worried me was you had a bunch of policymakers weighing in on a topic, most of whom knew absolutely nothing, most of whom probably hadn't used the internet anytime recently. But now you've got P2P engineers, you've got network provider engineers, you've got other people in that space talking to each other, seeing whether or not you can make peer-to-peer traffic more efficient, whether you can keep it sort of in the local area instead of going off to Sweden to pull back content. But at the end of the day, you do have a problem with peak congestion.
Yeah.
And
because of guys like me.
Yes, exactly. It's your fault. Or Twitter, but
Twitter is not the fault. But people like me are downloading a lot of video. And certainly this leads to the PR problem, right? Because the people who are blogging are probably in the 0.1%.
No, that's exactly right. So I mean, so the first thing I think is for people to understand, no one's trying to kill off peer-to-peer traffic. I think there's a legitimate issue of pirated material, but no one's actually got a good answer to that. Yeah. And to me, the most foolish response
Steal my videos, please. What? Steal my videos, please.
Oh. And use Verizon. The most foolish response to this whole issue is to say, well, just build more capacity. Right? I mean, that's easy for someone to say who's not actually writing a check. Just build more capacity. Well, you can go to Japan, right, where everybody concedes they have more capacity than we do. And what do they have? They have exactly the same problem. 5% of the people, chewing up 60% of the capacity, and they still have problems with peak congestion. So I don't pretend. I'm not a technologist. I'm not an engineer. I don't pretend to have the answer. But I do know that you need engineers talking to engineers. Let them figure this out. The internet has been, I think, a great self-regulatory mechanism, and it has had challenges in the past, which a lot of people are unaware of. It's not like that this is the first time we've had congestion issues. No. And each time, we solved them. Yeah. This will get solved, and we want that to be solved, and we want it to be solved in a way where everybody who's using our service says, this is great, I can do what I want on it. That's what we want, right? Yeah. We want them to be happy.
And on that, great conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to tell me about what your industry looks like, or what?
No, I would just say that, you know, I mean, I guess if I would put a point on it, I would say in the same way that we don't look anything like we did 5 years ago, I'll bet you we don't look anything like we do today, you know, 3 years from now. It's changing that fast. And I think it's changing in a way that customers are going to love, you know, I mean, and changing in part because of competition, and it forces everybody to be better. And you just got a million people out there dreaming up, you know, very cool things. And, you know, I think our goal is just ride the wave, but I think it's fun.
The next thing I'd love to see is multiple cameras during Olympics. I think that's coming to the website, but I'd love to see it on my HD channel so I could see
I think you will see that
runner
sooner,
number one,
sooner
runner
than,
number two, runner number three.
I think you'll see that sooner than you think, actually.
Interesting.
I mean, I've seen it in our labs with people doing that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, cool. Thank you very much for meeting with me.
Well, thanks for coming in.